This morning, should Texas put a moratorium on executions? Melissa Lucio's case gave one death penalty supporter pause. State Rep Jeff Leach explains why he would support that in just a moment. Trevor Reed returns to Texas. This morning, the backstory on the role that John Cornyn played in freeing the former Marine. We'll talk to the senator from D.C. Forget Florida. A county judge invites Disney to move to Texas after lawmakers there tangled with the entertainment empire. But was the invitation anything more than a publicity stunt? We'll ask County Judge K.P. George from Fort Bend County. And we say so long to Ross Ramsey this morning. The veteran political journalist retires on Monday and makes his final appearance on the roundtable with us in just a moment.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to our viewers across the state. Let's kick off the month of May here with the top political headlines in Texas. If you want to lower your property taxes, make sure you vote this coming Saturday. Two propositions are on the ballot. Both affect property taxes. The first really benefits senior citizens. The second one, though, raises the homestead exemption that you can claim on your taxes each year. The state's permanent school fund lost $250 million from its investments in Russian businesses. This is the fund that buys technology and textbooks for public school students in Texas. Fund managers just could not get out of the Russian investments quick enough when the West started imposing sanctions. That $250 million loss represents about half of what the fund spends on public school students each year. And an Austin rancher is enticing Elon Musk to move Twitter's headquarters from San Francisco to Central Texas. Jim Schwartner tweeted that he will give Musk 100 acres for free in Williamson County. Who knows what Musk might do? Remember, he moved Tesla to Texas last December, and his SpaceX program is already based in South Texas. This morning, though, switching gears, there are 199 men and women on death row in this state. Melissa Lucio is one. A court stopped her execution last week, just 72 hours before it was supposed to happen. Lucio's case is also giving pause to Republicans and Democrats in the state legislature. Should Texas put a moratorium on executions in this state until courts can check and recheck every single case? That is one of our questions for State Rep Jeff Leach, a Republican from Collin County and chairman of the Texas House Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. He also led the fight to stop Lucio's execution. Chairman Leach, welcome back to the program. Melissa Lucio's case now goes back to the trial court there in Cameron County down in Brownsville-Harlingen area to examine this new evidence. Do you expect that she is going to get a new trial now?
Well, I do. That's certainly what we're pushing for, what her legal team is pushing for, and what she's hoping for. Jason, this is what we've been working for all along, is to push a pause on her execution, which I'm very grateful the Court of Appeals saw what we saw and did the right thing. And now the hope is that she gets a new day in court, a fair trial in front of a jury of her peers where all of the evidence can come in and all of the problems that were in the first trial are solved. And I'm very hopeful that that will happen.
Well, let's talk about policy for a moment. 2 weeks ago in this program, you told us that you think there might be some legislation that could come out of this case, maybe stopping law enforcement from using coercive tactics in interrogations, and maybe what evidence can be admitted as well. Do you have any clarity on what might arise from this? And more importantly, could something like this pass the Republican-led legislature?
Well, I believe very strongly that it can and that it will. Republican legislators, pro-life conservatives who care, like I do, about protecting innocent life from the womb to the tomb, are taking this very seriously, along with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Look, we've got to look at every part of our system, and Miss Melissa's case, where the system failed her at every turn, is a great example of that. So, like I said a couple of weeks ago, and I'm more committed to this than ever, every option will be on the table, every tool in the toolbox. And we'll have hearings over the next several months in advance of next session, and we'll ask the tough questions. We'll invite law enforcement and prosecutors and defense counsel and other legislators and experts in to help us, to lock arms with us in pursuing the right reforms to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Would you support a moratorium on death penalty cases in this state or executions in this state until this has all gotten right?
Look, right now, going through what I just went through and seeing what I just saw, I would. I am, again, a supporter of the death penalty in the most heinous cases, but that is contingent upon the system working, the system being trustworthy and fair and reliable, us ensuring beyond a shadow of a doubt the guilt of the inmate, And right now I am unsure of that. My trust in the system is shaky. And so I would support that right now. I think there's a number of my conservative death penalty supporter colleagues who would support that as well. We pushed the pause button in Melissa's case, but it's important going forward that we get this right for all other cases. And I'm confident here in Texas that we will.
You broke the news to Melissa Lucio that the stay had been issued by the Court of Criminal Appeals. You've spoken to her a lot. You've been to see her in Gatesville with your colleagues from the legislature. Jeff, how has this case changed you?
As for me personally, look, this has rocked me in a way I didn't expect that it would. I know other legislators are in the same position, Jason, and this is what we should be doing as legislators, is rolling up our sleeves and fighting for things that we believe in, fighting for justice. And when we're so moved to do so, to not be quiet and to not sit down when we should speak up and when we should stand up.
Chairman Leach, we appreciate the time.
Jason, thank you. God bless you.
All right, it is the 1st of May here, and the runoff elections are 3 weeks away here in Texas. The biggest race, of course, on your ballot, the Republican runoff for Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton versus George P. Bush. Paxton leads in the polls, and despite an indictment and ongoing FBI corruption investigation, Paxton got the full endorsement of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and now Patrick and Governor Abbott are joining Paxton in at least one of his legal fights here. Ross Ramsey is the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune, joining us here for Statewide as always. Ross, what message does this send to Republican primary voters who will be going to the polls?
Well, they've kind of joined arms here. You know, Paxton's going to be on the ballot here in just a minute in this runoff, and the governor and the lieutenant governor are joining his appeal of a whistleblower suit filed by several of his top aides. Paxton says whistleblower law in Texas does not apply to elected officials, and Abbott and Patrick are throwing in friends of the court briefs saying they agree with him.
I want to switch off and ask you about Title 42. The U.S. Supreme Court is taking up the Remain in Mexico policies. Lower federal courts are working on Title 42, as we've seen in the headlines. Texas is really spending a lot of money on the border. What kind of results are taxpayers really getting, though?
Well, you know, the very first problem that we talked about when they started doing this is still the problem. If you send a state police officer down there as trooper or a National Guard member, they can't arrest people under international law. All they can do is call the Border Patrol, just like you can. They can grab them on smaller charges, and in fact, that's what they're mostly getting, is trespassing and misdemeanor charges to kind of slow these people down, but not to run them back or detain them. They still got the same problem that they started with.
And we are spending billions to at least get that far. Ross, back to you in a moment. Thank you very much. Coming up, Senator John Cornyn with a backstory of what led to Trevor Reed's release from a Russian prison. And a county judge tells Disney to forget Florida and move to Texas. Fort Bend County Judge K.P. George explains why this was not a publicity stunt in just a moment. And our most popular episode of Y'all-itics all year, waiting for you to download it this morning. Our real estate expert walks us through how to get your property taxes lowered this year, but the deadline to do so is fast approaching. Download Y'all-itics this morning wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. This weekend, Trevor Reed is recovering at a hospital in San Antonio. But the politics behind Reed's release from that Russian prison is a story in itself. The Biden administration was privately negotiating this with Russia while publicly tightening the screws on President Putin for invading Ukraine. And the senior senator from Texas played a role in Reed's release. John Cornyn this morning from his office in D.C. on what he asked of President Biden. Senator, welcome back to the program here. Trevor Reed's parents called you after their son, their 28-year-old son, was released from that Russian prison there. What role did you play in advocating for his release? Every time we talk to you, you have the picture of Trevor behind you there over your shoulder.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's a chart. Trevor, a young Marine who was falsely arrested and accused and convicted in court in Russia. Mainly my role was very limited. It was try to raise the visibility of this issue, including asking President Biden to meet with Trevor's parents, which he generously did. And I think he was moved by that experience, and hopefully that helped bring Trevor home.
Senator, I want to talk about the timing of all this. The Biden administration and Congress are tightening the screws on Russia, obviously, for the invasion of Ukraine. What's interesting about this that you pointed out recently is that this happened. This back channel negotiations were apparently happening at the same time. How was all that done?
Well, it's very important for two powerful nations to stay in communication with each other, even if you're in conflict with each other, as we are, through our support for Ukraine and condemning, of course, as we have, and sanctioning the invasion of this democratically ruled country. But it demonstrates the importance of keeping lines of communication open at all times. And I know it may seem hard to conceptualize, but you really almost need to compartmentalize your brain and deal with problems you can, while recognizing that there's going to be large parts of our relationship which are very much strained by this unjustified invasion of Ukraine.
To your knowledge, how long had this been in the works? Did you get any indication of that?
Well, we've been working on this, supporting the Trevor's family and him for many months, and a number of members of Congress got involved on a bipartisan basis and kept in regular touch with Trevor. But I think probably what changed everything was when President Biden agreed at long last to meet with his parents, and I think he was touched by that experience and convinced to do this swap. The Russians were not doing anybody any favors. This was purely a transaction, swapping a Russian criminal who had been imprisoned here in the United States for Trevor, who had been unjustly accused and convicted.
Senator, President Biden is asking Congress for an additional $33 billion to buy more ammunition, more military equipment for Ukraine. Where are you on this issue right now?
Well, I'm for giving the Ukrainians everything they can use, both in terms of humanitarian assistance as well as weapons. Today, I'm expecting the House to pass a bill that I introduced to try to facilitate that, called the Ukrainian Democracy Lend-Lease Act. You may remember from your history that it was the Lend-Lease Act that provided Britain and our other allies military arms to defend themselves with, even when the United States was not involved in World War II.
Are you concerned that this conflict could widen in unpredictable ways, and we could be just, going down the rabbit's hole here on another war that lasts for years? We
don't know how long this is going to go on. It's really up to Putin, and unfortunately, time is probably on his side because they use these attrition tactics where they flatten the cities and kill everybody in them. But so far, the Ukrainians are holding their own, and we got to continue to supply what they can use and help train them to use even more sophisticated weapons in order to defend their country. And that's what we're all about on a bipartisan basis.
Senator, before we let you go, I want to ask you about a seat you once held. The Republican runoff for the Texas Attorney General position is coming up May 24th. George P. Bush versus Ken Paxton, as you well know. Do you plan to endorse either candidate in this race?
I'm going to leave that up to Republican primary voters to figure that out. That's really their call and not mine. But let's say I'm very, very concerned.
Senator, we appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Now to Florida, where that state's hasty political move against Disney World might end up costing taxpayers $1 billion. As these pesky details are coming out, a county judge from Texas is telling Disney to forget Florida, move Mickey Mouse to Texas, he says. An invite like that, though, makes headlines, and it is why we called Judge K.P. George, the chief executive in Fort Bend County, just southwest of Houston. Judge, welcome back to the program. You sent this letter last week. Have you heard from Disney at all?
So, no, we haven't. Disney is a humongous organization. When they make decisions, that's going to have absolutely big impact. Bottom line is, answer your question, we haven't, but definitely stay optimistic and look forward to hear from them.
Well, in your letter, you said that Disney faces an anti-business, authoritarian, and culture war attacks there in Florida. But, a lot of people looking at this might say, well, Texas is really not that much different overall than Florida, is it?
Honestly, I don't control Tallahassee or Austin. I don't have any control there. I only control my county. And honestly, I don't have any specific comment about that.
Judge, Fort Bend County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state. Where in the world would Disney go if they took you up on this offer?
You know what? We have thousands and thousands of acres because what happened is Fort Bend county's 2/3 of the population live in 1/3 of the land. And when you go to the south side of the county, there are thousands of acres of land available. It looked like a countryside. And also surrounding counties, like it's so much of land is never going to be an issue, in my opinion.
A lot of people look at this, Judge, as an attention-grabbing move. I don't know if you would characterize it like that or not, but this actually worked out for you in 2019 when you sent a letter to Amazon. They actually took you up on an offer, right?
And I believe that is the case. And I always believe in doing things what I control. And I don't control a lot of things. I wish I could control what is going on in Washington, D.C. and other places, but I don't. And so I am only going to focus on what I control. And this is what the initiative is in my power to do it. And I did. And whatever the outcome, and look forward, I'm optimistic and positively looking forward to it.
Judge, we'll stay in touch with you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Coming up, Beto O'Rourke has hired Cecile Richards on his campaign, but is abortion rights a winning argument for Democrats this fall? One of our topics next on the roundtable, and it is the final roundtable for Ross Ramsey, retiring from the Texas Tribune tomorrow. Help us send him off here in just a moment. This morning, the end of an era in Texas political journalism. We don't want to be presumptuous, but at least it feels like that. Ross Ramsey is officially retiring from the Texas Tribune May 1st. That was Ross a few years back, trailing Ann Richards on the campaign trail. Ross spent the last 13 years leading the Trib. He also has worked for the Houston Chronicle, the Dallas Times-Herald, and radio stations in Dallas and Denton, among other places. Ross grew up in El Paso, as we like to trade ideas about the best restaurants when we talk to. He attended UNT, and Ross, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong here. Do I remember you telling me that you played the saxophone? Hold that thought for a second here. Evan Smith called Ross a capital wise man, and we will miss that wisdom on Sunday morning. So before we start to put the headlines in perspective this morning, let's take a moment for Ross. And Ross, what's next for you, man?
I'm just going to sit around and do nothing for a couple of 3 months and see what happens when I get bored. The plan right now is to say no and just sit back. We'll see what happens.
All right. I know that was completely off the cuff for you there, but I did want to ask because you are revered around here too. Let's get down to the headlines here and talk about Beto O'Rourke hiring Cecile Richards. And Ross, will start with you as always on this one too. He hired her to be his national finance director, a national finance director. When I heard the news, I'm thinking, is abortion rights really going to be a winning argument for Democrats, or is Beto really hoping that the Supreme Court makes a ruling this summer that might catapult this into the news?
Right now it looks like it's more important in what I call the finance primary than in the voter primary. Yeah. Voters don't seem really alarmed about this at this point. They might later, they might light up, between now and November. But at this point, there are a lot of national people with, skin in this game who've been dealing with Cecile Richards and others for years, who are probably going to want to help attack in Texas and help the Beto O'Rourke campaign on that one issue.
And of course, Cecile Richards, for people who don't know, is a former director of, a national director, president rather, of Planned Parenthood. Bud, what do you make of that news?
Well, and of course, it's been nearly 30 years since her mother was governor, but she's been high profile with Planned Parenthood. Beto, in his speeches lately, has led with abortion rights and LGBT, and those are the two issues that he's building his early campaign around. But those are not issues. Even abortion rights is a narrow issue in Texas. It's not something that's going to lift him over the top and win those votes in rural states at all, rural counties.
And Bernadine, when Ross mentioned it, you said absolutely yes, that this is all about money, fundraising.
Yes, because see, she joined his campaign as finance chair. She's not necessarily joining his campaign to push productive rights. So I think that she's going to add to his campaign. He needs to raise more money. You have Abbott sitting on a war chest, over $50-60 million. Yeah. He has close to $7 million. So I think that she's going to add more to his campaign as a finance chair than someone who would address abortion rights.
But I want to ask you about Governor Abbott. He's facing more criticism for what's going on at the border, especially after that National Guardsman died down there and drowned down there. The governor is now asking the public to donate money for what it costs to bus migrants up from the border to D.C. How's all this playing out for the governor? He got the headlines, he got the news cycle out of it at least. You know,
he got some national attention. He got some pictures of the migrants landing in D.C. and everything. But he wanted to really get some big play out of this and outdo DeSantis for a week. And DeSantis has managed to stay in the headlines. And, I think the governor's also built some negatives over this, and I don't think this has been a total win for him.
Bernadine?
He did get the headlines, but he also got criticism for using taxpayer dollars to fund the buses. And then also you had the migrants thanking him for giving them a bus ticket. So he didn't get the kind of publicity long-term that I think that he thought he would get.
Yeah, we're still waiting to see the final tab so far on migrants.
Yeah.
Ross, final word on this one this morning.
Well, he's getting some pokes from the right on this. The left is praising him for helping these migrants get to the places where they wanted to go. Some of the people on the right are saying, why are you using taxpayer money for that? The governor's office isn't saying why they're doing a GoFundMe account here. That's what they're doing.
All right, guys, thanks so much, Ross. We will miss you. Thank you, as always, for everything you've done here, too.
Bye, Ross.
One more goodbye this morning we want to definitely point out. Jessica Sherman has worked behind the scenes with us on this program since the beginning. She edits it all together each week before it goes out to the stations. Jessica decided to put family first. She's going to be a full-time mom. A thank you to her this morning as well. Thank you for watching every weekend. We appreciate that. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Have a good weekend.